Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Matt Williamson. You are watching Pop Goes the 60s, and I have a very special guest tonight. This is Andrew Sandoval. Now, Andrew Sandoval, you may know that name very well. He is a Grammy Award nominated reissuer. He is an engineer of historical albums, a journalist for The Hollywood Reporter and Shindig magazine, a professional musician and songwriter whose music has appeared in TV shows like Dawson's Creek and Party of Five, and he is a writer. And there are many more things that I could tell you about him, but we only have an hour, so we're going to get right to it here. Andrew, thank you for joining me.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. I've been watching you now for years. I don't want to make you seem old, but no, you popped into my feed one day because I'm obsessed with the 1960s and 1960s music, and I started watching your videos, and I thought, when my Kinks book comes to fruition, I would love to be a guest. I'll reach out to Matt and see maybe there's a chance that he'll want to talk to me, and so we exchanged some emails and plotted this out, and I'm thrilled to be a guest on one of my favorite shows.
Well, thank you. And you are one of my favorite writers. And the book in question is The New Kinks Day by Day, All Day and All the Night, written with Doug Hinman. So this is the book. I didn't expect you to do something on this scale, but I'm very, very happy. And quite frankly, I would have liked to have you on after I do my video series on the Kinks, but this is going to help me get that series done because if it's as thorough as the Monkees, which I'm sure it will be, that'll help me greatly in my research for to doing more videos like this.
Yeah, well, it is very thorough, and that's down to Doug, because he's been researching the Kinks since he discovered them in 1965, or maybe even was a fan in late 64. But he saw them in 65 on television, and then he started keeping a ledger of their different TV appearances in the U.S. And the Kinks' disappearance from the U.S. airwaves on the radio and television, and their sort of descent into obscurity, which occurs in sort of post Sunny Afternoon, going through some of their best records: Village Green Preservation Society, Arthur, and loads of wonderful singles. Um, Made him more zealous to find out about where the Kinks were, and he started collecting things. In the 80s, he started a project on chronicling their day by day story. And I first got in touch with Doug in the 1990s. He had a book out, a discography called You Really Got Me, which I ordered directly from him. It was a self-published book. Like, this Kinks book is done by, I'm the publisher of it, as I am of the Monkees book. And our research lines ran sort of parallel. He taught me, he's a catalog librarian. He's now retired, but he taught me a lot about doing deep research with primary source material, which is meaning not just Googling on the internet. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but this is in the days of interlibrary loans and other things like that. And so he helped me along with my research on the Monkees. That was the book that I was working on, and we both had books published by Backbeat Books in the early 2000s, and we were both gratified to have our work widely distributed, but we both felt, wow, wouldn't it be great if we had a book filled with images and all this extra stuff? Because, Backbeat, they're trying to get out to a major market. And so they're like, your book has to be 250 or so pages, and it has to be black and white
Mhm.
images only. And in Doug's original book, there's maybe a dozen images. With the Monkees, I think there's more than that. But my Monkees day by day book I put out 5 years ago, and that's got it's over 700 pages. And this Kinks book, which just really covers their 1964 to 1971 era, the reprise era, as it would be in the United States, it's 520 pages. So Doug's original book ran 300 something pages and did their whole career. We had so much more information, so it's so much more thorough, and there's a greater emphasis on breaking down the individual recordings and recording sessions wherever we have the information. So that's the story behind the Kinks.
Well, I didn't expect to have something on this scale after the Monkees book. So did you jump right into this after the Monkees book 5 years ago, or did you have some time in between, or?
I had some time in between. I did a book with Mickey Dolenz of his
Oh yeah.
personal archives called
Hmm.
Untold I Had a Good Time. And when I was doing the Monkees book, I had been out touring with the Monkees. And I was in Australia with Mickey and Michael Nesmith. And Mickey said to me on one of our stopovers at an airport, he said, "Hey, when we get home, I've been thinking about all these films I made, 8 millimeter and 16 millimeter films. You know how to transfer stuff. Can you get them all transferred to high definition?" And so I said, sure. He goes, well, the clock is ticking. I got to get this done. I'm going to. So when we got back to Los Angeles, he invited me to this space that I'd never been to, and I'd known him about 30 years at that point. And he had the films there, but he had all these other boxes of stuff, and I'm like, what's in these boxes? Oh, don't look at those. And little by little, he said, well, look, first things first, you got to do these films. So I got all the films digitized, and then I was like, please, could I see what's in it? And then it turned out the boxes were filled with his photography and other stuff he
Ah,
collected. He was a pack rat, and he just picked up all kinds of things along the way. And he had stuff that you wouldn't even imagine he would have, like Ringo's drumsticks from when he went to meet the Beatles at Abbey Road in February of 1967, and he had his concert ticket from when the Four Monkees went to see the Beatles at Dodger Stadium in 1966, and he had, that was the tip of the iceberg. He had his receipt from the Apple Boutique, and he had all this stuff is in the book. So that was a wonderful thing that I spent a couple years on after that. And then I did another book of Monkees photos with a guy named Joe Russo, who had a huge. When I was doing my book, I was looking for more images, and he had bought up loads and loads of negatives, and so that was another follow on, and that was done in the middle of doing the Kinks book because I had thought the Kinks book, Doug said, "Oh, well, I've got it all organized, all the research," but I had to write out the narrative of it, and then I had to insert all the recording information that I had. And so I thought that was going to be about a year, but it took 2 years. So,
okay.
and for most people, that would be a very accelerated pace. I mean, because I'm self-financing this and trying to make it happen. I've got the fire under me to get it done. But I did this Smoke-Filled Dreams book of photos, which is another like 500-page book in the middle of it. And then
Mhm.
now I'm working on two other different book projects. There's no real rest for me, no sabbatical for me.
Yeah, I understand. If you don't mind my asking, what is a typical work day for you? I mean, how long is your average work day?
Well, it's all day and all the night, literally. What happens is I'll get up in the morning. A regular day will be getting up around, 8-ish, and then getting to the space I'm in now, which is my office that I've occupied for I guess like 12 years I've been over in this space working in um it's um it's not just a workspace for writing. There's another room where I do mixing, and I've mixed a lot of stuff for recent reissues there. Um and I also record a radio show called Come to the Sunshine here,
Hmm.
and that's
Yes.
broadcast by WFMU on Mondays. It goes out on Mondays, but it's like there's archives. You can listen to it any day of the week at any
Hmm.
time.
Yeah, I've
But
been
Monday
through
is
some of those. Those are good.
yeah, Monday's the traditional day for that. So I've been doing that for 19 years. So it starts that's when it starts, and then what happens is usually I'll work through to the afternoon. I'll go home and take a break, and then I'll come back and do some more work at night. It depends on what I'm doing. And but I'll sort of break up the day a bit, but and then it's like usually a 7-day work week. I don't have much off time. I
Mhm.
used to do a lot of touring. I used to tour with the Monkees. I was producing their concert tours and managing them, and so I was doing a lot of traveling then. But I retired from that about 3 years ago, so I don't do any of that anymore. And I've just been doing the book business. That during the pandemic, I started doing the Monkees book, and I did that in a year, the 720-page version of it. And there was such a great demand for it and such a great audience that sprung up around it. I developed this system of printing it with really high quality printing, and
Mhm.
then distributing it myself um, directly to the audience. And I got a warehouse, and which they distribute all kinds of things, not just books, but that they send out the books, and I market it myself. I make a direct appeal to people like yourself, and you bought one of my books, and so that's the thing. When I found out that it worked, that people wanted stuff from me, that I decided I want to do more of that because for years I've been working in the reissue business for Rhino and a lot of other labels,
Sure. Hmm.
Sony, and some are better than others as far as giving me creative control to do what I want. But there's always a compromise, and it's similar to the book thing where it's like, yeah, there can only be so many tracks on this, or the artist doesn't want this on the record, or you have to do this to get it out by record store day or whatever.
Hmm.
Running my own business, these books are just kind of insane. They're much longer and larger and heavier than any other things of their type because I'm not restricted by those constraints. I'm only restricted by my imagination and my you know, what I'm willing to stomach as far as, I finance all of this myself. I'm not crowdfunding it or anything, but essentially, once it's out, then it is crowdfunded. It is fan to fan, peer to peer sales. You can't find them on Amazon, and they're not in any shops. So
Hmm.
it's a different thing, but it makes it a really different experience because I can just give you an unfiltered version of my writing and my archiving. And it's something I feel really good about sending out into the world. And I feel like it may not get to everybody right now, but it exists. And so therefore it's there for history.
Yeah, it's a good point because I've mentioned on my channel here many times that I think some of the best work going forward is going to be done by fans or like people like yourself who funds it yourself because you're not beholden to a publisher or a record company who at this point doesn't seem to want to do a lot with physical media. And I wanted to touch upon that with you a little bit because you've got some direct experience with the Monkees and some issues with trying to get certain things out that fans expect. And we're
Mhm.
heading into new times now. So we'll touch on that in a bit. I want to get back to the Kinks because I know I've heard you say you've had two favorite bands, and neither was the Monkees. Once I heard you say it was the Beatles, and once I heard you say it was the Kinks. So I know you're very fond of both, but obviously the Kinks probably were not very well represented with a very good biography.
Well, yeah, there are a number of books on the Kinks, and there's some good ones that I grew up reading from the time I was 11 or 12. I started buying. I bought Johnny Rogan's book on the
Okay.
Kinks, which there's a more recent, longer version of it that's more focused on Ray Davies. I bought John Savage's official biography of the Kinks in 1984 as well. These are two books I would take to school with me and read instead of doing my homework and other things. I
Mhm.
mean, I literally was studying up for what I'm doing now. And then, there's Ray's biography, X-Ray, which is the unauthorized autobiography. So he's conflicted. It's partially completely truth telling, and then partially a science fiction narrative of him in the future with a journalist, and he's writing the journalist part too. And then there's Dave's sort of no nonsense biography called Kink, and then Dave does another autobiography a few years ago called Living on a Thin Line. Ray has a book called Americana, which is very wonderful, I think. So there are loads and loads of Kinks books, and but there's none that really occupies this space because they're they have a different job to do. They're approaching the narrative. If it's Ray, it's his narrative, it's his version of the Kinks story. If it's Dave, it's
Mhm.
his version, which is always going to be slightly opposing. And then, John Savage got access to everybody in 1984, and it was wonderful, but he couldn't put out everything, and it still had to go through Ray.
Mhm.
So subsequently, he had an unfiltered, unedited portion of his Ray Davies interviews published by Ugly Things, which was incredibly helpful to us.
Mhm.
Ugly Things also published a great Richie Unterberger interview with Dave Davies that was very helpful to us. Um, Johnny Rogan didn't have those issues and was much disliked. He's now passed on, but he was much disliked by Ray and stuff because it was just like I think for anybody getting involved in the King story, Ray wants to be the person to mold the narrative. To him it's his story.
Mhm.
So it's a difficult thing, but it's history and so getting back to favorites, it is the Beatles and the Kinks, and then my third favorite is the Easy Beats, and that's
Oh,
the band
really? Oh,
that
wow.
I fanatically collect and adore and worship and feel that they are one of the most underrated and gifted groups. And but my list of other, I wrote a book on the Bee Gees as well, day by day book of their early work. I'm fascinated by the Bee Gees, the Beach Boys, the Hollies, and on down. And the Monkees are a favorite, but my connection with them is so different because they're so familial to me. I grew up watching them, and then somehow organically we met up and became connected, inextricably connected in a wonderful way because um, I've been able to do for the Monkees and the Monkees fans what I've always wanted to do with every group, which is
Yeah.
to show what I feel the best aspects of them and to promote a greater understanding of their art. And before I came along, people didn't really think of the Monkees' music as art. And there's some good books on the Monkees, the Glenn A. Baker book and the Eric Lefkowitz book, and they started the story. But the greater understanding of the Monkees came through my ability and access. And that is really a remarkable, totally organic thing. It sounds like I'm taking credit for it, but in reality, it's just out there in the cosmos where I was allowed to do this. And then I met those four guys, and they allowed me in, and they allowed me to do what I do and connect with them. And we had this relationship that goes beyond what I would ever have imagined. But because they're because they're not just the people that I see on the TV screen, they're people in my life that I spent years and years with. I feel so much different about them than I do about other artists.
Hmm. Yeah, you're the guy that a lot of Beatles fans wish the Beatles had in place because you've been the guy that's really, because you're a fan and kind of grew up with them and you want to do right by them, not from a business sense so much, but just from an artistic sense, that's what a lot of Beatles fans feel is missing, well, more recently, shall we say. And it seems like they are hell bent on going all digital, and a lot of the older fans are feeling left out. And I know that you've got some personal experience with that because a lot of Beatles fans feel that, hey, we're going to buy this stuff. There's a market for it. Why won't you produce this stuff? It's not quite that simple. And I know you've got some experience with that and with the Monkees, Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Jones box that just came out this past summer or fall. It's not been easy for you to get some of those things past even at Rhino, which I thought the Monkees were a big deal for Rhino, but that's not really the case, is it?
No, they're not really a big deal at Rhino. I mean, if you went up to Rhino, of course, the Monkees, we love the Monkees. Yeah, sure. But, they're also putting out the Eagles and Frank Sinatra and Led Zeppelin, and those are big deal artists to them. And then there's other artists that are more contemporary that in their catalog that they're more excited about. The Monkees are just kind of part of the furniture. They're there and they can do whatever they want with a catalog, so they're not that excited about it. And that's counterintuitive to people. I would have people when I worked at Rhino like, how come you guys don't do those Dr. Demento records anymore? And it had been years since they did any Dr. And there's nothing wrong with the Dr. Demento records, but that was one of the things that now they're coming to get me. The police, they're coming to anyway, that was one of the things that Rhino were sort of built around this quirkiness, the sort of novelty of things, and picking up on the Monkees, Richard Foos and Harold Bronson, taking a chance to do the Monkees catalog, and then really being successful with it was unique. And then they bought the catalog, so but things have changed. It's been decades since that happened. They bought the Monkees catalog, what, 32 years ago or something like that. So. It's strange, time passes on, and then you look at the Beatles, and there's been some great stuff that the Beatles camp have done, particularly like the White Album box set they did. I thought that was one of the best reissues, not just by the Beatles, but by any artist, as far as thoroughness, great liner notes, very nice packaging, the audio was fantastic, and they did a service as far as having stuff that you couldn't get anywhere else. But the reality is that Apple's a very slow-moving company. They have to, please their board members, which, in this case is evolving because you have two Beatles that have passed on, you have two Beatles that are currently living, you have um, the sons of the deceased Beatles, and they have their opinions on what, and then it's going to keep changing. And you're also seeing with not just the Beatles, but other artists like the Beach Boys. They sold off all of their sort of intellectual property, as it were, to Irving Azoff's iconic company. And so you're seeing Beach Boys reissues, and you're seeing other reissues. People are getting out of the business because they realize we're not going to be able to manage it from beyond the grave. Um, the Beatles is a strange circumstance because they have hardcore fans, and there is that mentality that you see, like, yeah, you guys are going to buy this anyway, so why should we try? And that's very off-putting, I know, for a lot of fans. And that's not directly Apple or the Beatles thing. It's a lot of people in the music industry. And I see it at Rhino too. I mean, I go in for meetings and I'll say, you know what you could do that would be really cool that hasn't been done? You could do this. And they'll be like, okay, yeah, we're putting out a colored vinyl version of you name the obvious album. Well, okay, but you've already done like five of the. No, well, this is our idea. We don't need you anymore. It's not your thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So I have to just sort of say, okay. And that's the thing. The last thing I'll say in this go round for this answer is that when I was a director of A&R for Rhino, I was under much suspicion by my boss, above my boss's boss, really, because he sort of felt like, well, you really love this stuff, so you're not very objective. We need somebody who's objective because it'd be so cool not to sell to people like you, but to sell to people who aren't that into
Hmm.
this. You know,
Yeah.
so what you have to do that, there is a formula to it, and it's the reverse of my book. So you take my book, right, and you say, okay, so here's this book, and it costs about $100 to buy plus postage, and it's very heavy. It weighs 9 pounds, and it's 520 pages. Okay, so you're gonna have to make a book that's about half the size, and you're going to have to have less images because it costs too much to license the images, and you're going to have to make it available on Amazon, and they're gonna make it so that it's much more affordable. The list price on it will be like $30, but you'll be able to get it for like $20. And the book itself is going to be severely compromised, but you might sell more books.
Mm.
Now, I could maybe sell twice as many books, but it's not as profitable for me personally because I'm not getting out the history the way I want it. And so I'm better off selling half as many books at a higher price to, in the best way I can do it. Um, and actually I make about as much money because in order to dumb it down that much, you have to take so many more cuts, and you're putting out something that's not as good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's counterintuitive. People keep their minds explode when I tell them like, well, what do you mean it's not on Amazon? What do you mean I can't go to a bookstore? Like, oh, and they're like, you know what, Andrew, you're really missing out because you could be selling, this is a pretty nice book. You could sell it to a lot of other people if you just changed what you're doing. And it's like, I don't want to do that.
Mm.
I've done that all my whole life, so I'm doing a few things that are like just what I want to do. And I'm taking all the risk, in the process. It's a really interesting position to be in.
Yeah, that's all very good information because fans just don't understand the business side of it and the money that can be made and the money that you can leave on the table. Ultimately, the one good thing, many of the fans our age and older, they have a certain expectation of what can be done. And that's a good thing, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And but the way that happened was that in the CD boom, there was a lot of money to be made at these labels. And so they could pay for somebody like me to go into a vault and go through, pull out tapes that had been unissued and go to a studio, which costs money, and then do mixes and then present it to the artists and all this other stuff. There was the money to do that, and there isn't the money now to do that because with streaming and with peer-to-peer sharing of digital files, a lot of that and the lack of physical product sales, a lot of that has gone away. I mean,
Mm.
there's a good amount of money coming from physical vinyl sales that, gets you a great lacquer cut by Kevin Gray and then pressed at a nice factory and stuff, and you're paying a lot of money for it. And people, that's the thing, people value that and they don't mind paying, that much money, $40, $50 for a really nice vinyl LP, apparently. But they, in some respects, they do mind spending a lot of money on a CD, or they mind spend, it's different experiences for different people in different times. It's a very odd thing, but that kind of industry doesn't exist for me anymore. That's why I'm in the book business now. I
Okay.
can't do those things. When I do those things now, and I do a few of them a year, it's usually I'm subsidizing the company, whoever is putting it out. I'm offering my services for next to nothing in order to make a dream project happen. Um, I'm working on a couple right now, and there's a few I've worked on for years now that are about to come out, and that's the reality. And people would say, "Well, why would you work for free?" Well, it's like you, you have to understand who I am. I mean, at my heart, I'm a collector, and I'm somebody who is music is everything to me. And so if it means that unreleased music by this person or BBC sessions by that person that wouldn't normally get done, I want to be there to make it happen, but I have to put up the money myself to mix the stuff or do the restoration myself and pay for the rent and all. I mean, it's like
Sure.
it's
Yeah.
crazy. So it's a weird situation that we're in now, and for a lot of people they're like, I just want it if it's cheap or free, or why do I have to pay for that? Why are concert tickets so expensive? Well, it's the last place where people are making any money. and
Yeah, good point.
you
That's a
know,
good
and
point.
and it's not just the artist who's walking on stage. There's usually a band, there's a truck, there's a bus, there's a road crew, there's a guy who's the production manager, there's a guy at the front of house mixing the sound. There's all these people, and their lives, they've all got to be paid for. And if you want to do a good show, you're going to have all those people. You're not just going to be, going out and trying to do it all yourself.
Mhm.
So it's an odd thing. It's an odd thing. We're in an odd place, but I do feel like the Beatles or other artists, you could work on multiple tracks. You could be doing, meaning stuff for the hardcore fans. You could be doing some stuff for the casual fans. And you could be developing um, markets. I think, there's a lot of emphasis on trying who the Beatles will be forgotten. Who's going to remember the Beatles? And we're like, what are you talking about? No one's ever going to forget the Beatles. No, 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 they're going to be forgotten soon. So we've got to find some people now who don't care about the Beatles at all, and we're going to make them know about the Beatles in some way. And we've got to figure that out because that's more important than these people who do know about the Beatles. Whatever we do, they're going to like it anyway. So they're done with.
Yeah.
We got to chase these people now. So I know that's been a thing that you've discussed on some other videos, and it's been the thing that's been rolling around. But that's where a lot of people who are not as emotionally attached to the music are at, who are in a more of a decision-making level with not just the Beatles but other artists. And so it's difficult to come in and be a person who is emotionally attached and says, you know, I know a way to get to people. I know that this is going to move the needle, as it were, with the audience. And sometimes people trust me and they believe me and it bears fruit. And other times they're like, why? We don't need to do all that work. We could just
Hmm.
do this.
Yeah. How it seems to me, if I was the business manager of any of these groups, it seems to me you would provide for a couple different demographics, that there would be money to be made in each. You're investing in the future, but yet you're satisfying an existing base. It seems like that would put food on the table for the company. But apparently, obviously it takes bodies to do that, and maybe they don't want to invest in the infrastructure or keep. Yeah, that I understand that part of it. So, how many more years do you think we have of doing projects like this? Because these projects that we want, viewers of this channel want, the projects you're involved in, I mean, these are the things that are being bucked up against by the record companies and publishers and whatnot. How much more do you think we can get away doing this?
I really don't know. I don't know if it's a few years or a lot of years. And all I know is that I have no plans to retire. I haven't made the money to retire. I'll just keep doing this for as long as I can, and I'll keep funding it myself with whatever I can do. I started out working in the music business as a teenager, and I've been supporting myself since I was 18. And I've had no other backing, no family money, no nothing. And I've had some really lean times, and I've had to, buy and sell. Musical equipment and do every sort of level of work, but music is my thing. So I've learned to do a number of different things and transition a lot, and that's what I'm just going to keep doing because I feel that's why I'm here. That's my calling. And when I'm not feeling good about things, music is the thing that is carrying me, so I'm lucky in the sense that I discovered that some people never find something that is like can be the through line of their life to like get them all the way through it. And I just always go back to it, that this is, oh, things aren't going right. Well, how am I going to change it up and but keep on this music thing,
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, I wouldn't do what I'm doing, just for the money, I mean, you have to love it and it has to be a part of you. And I've made the prediction that I think some of the best things that are going to be done going forward will be by fans who aren't getting paid or who maybe would get paid in the future after they invest in it themselves because they do have the passion for it and they do have the emotion tied up into it. So I think that's where you're going to get some of the best work. So I think there's a market for that in the future. Obviously, it's unauthorized, unlicensed, and all those things, but we'll worry about that stuff later.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. The other reason to keep going is that there's surprises around the corner. There's always something that's being discovered. Oh, so and so left these tapes. They've been found here, or this recording of a television show we didn't think existed anymore is
Hmm.
survive. There's stuff. I don't have enough time of the day to listen to all the stuff that people send me, even, and it's stuff that I'm interested in. So I mean, my you were asked about my workday. I mean, I have to be very regimented. I collect 45s primarily, and I have to be very like, okay, I'm going to spend 90 minutes transferring 45s, cataloging them, and getting them put away, and because I always feel like you listen to the 45s, there's oftentimes you're discovering different mixes, different versions, different pressings of things, So, but I can't listen for pleasure for long periods of time because then I have to be on task to get a book like the Kinks done or the Monkees. I have to basically shut out a lot of other stuff because otherwise it becomes a fantasy project. Like I have lots of friends who are like, well, my life's work is I'm working on this book on you name the thing. And then that's their journey in their life. They spend 10, 20 years working on a book. And you see bits and pieces of it and you realize, well, they're onto something great. They're never going to finish it. I have to finish it because if I don't, I can't pay my rent, you know.
Hmm. Yeah.
So so I've been driven to the to this place. There is a commercial concern despite all of my loose talk about it's about the art. It is about the art, but there is a thing where I realize the people I want to see this may not be around if I say 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I'll be done. I need that extra time. There's always going to be new stuff that's turning up. We did this book, and so far it hasn't been an avalanche. We had like two things that have turned up since then. A television show we didn't know about from early 64, and
Oh.
somebody who attended a gig on their American tour in 65 had like a breakdown of the set list. I mean, those are two great things, but we're also doing a multi-volume process. So this book goes up to 71, and theoretically, we're going to get into the next block of 72 to 84 in another year, based on the sales and how the rhythm of things.
Mhm.
But that also allows us, if these things come in, and that's what I talked to Doug about, that we can have addendums in these next two volumes and a big indices at the end where they're bound. That's the beauty of this is you put out something like this and they're like, hey, you know what I've got? And then it's like, wow, where was that all this time? But if you wait years and years and years to get that one thing, it holds up all the other information and it doesn't necessarily benefit it, you know? So that's the push and pull of this.
Right, right. There's always going to be stuff that comes up. Like you say, people discover things and maybe a diary is found or some recordings, and you can't wait for that stuff. It's fine to have an addendum and have updates. And I think that's because you do have to get it out. And I do like having deadlines for myself because if I didn't do that, if I didn't have an incentive to get it out quicker, I just would spend too much time and it would be much less satisfying. I like to get on to the next thing.
Yeah.
So I can do my best with what I've got, and I can't wait for something I can always do an addendum. That's perfectly fine. So yeah, it is a lot of discipline, and you have to know when you're done. And my background is graphic design, and I've known designers who had spent way too much time. In other words, I would run advertising, marketing, and design departments. So you would build people out based on how quickly they could turn something around and they had more value. So that's really how I've built some of my professional life, based, what do I charge for my time? What do I charge myself for my time? Comes down to that. To get
Mm.
to operate on a prolific level, you have to utilize your time so wisely. So I understand the issues you have. And but like I say, obviously this gives you great purpose and it gives you great satisfaction to be able to do the work you do. So you get the payment isn't just monetary.
Oh no. And it's, there's still the thrill. I mean, I'm far from jaded. I still get a huge thrill putting down the needle or spooling up a tape or, I've had so many life-changing experiences. And, I've also encountered and worked directly with a number of the artists that I've done reissues on, and I have my own true life experiences with them, which, I didn't set out to meet all these people or whatever. I just the thing was when I was growing up, I'd listen to records and I'd wonder how did they make this record because the way it's making me feel is so intense. How do you write a song like Penny Lane or Strawberry Fields or um, Till the End of the Day or Lavender Hill or like how do you make that sound? What's that sound on Barclay Muse? Oh, that's a tack piano. Well, what's that? Well, that's a piano that has tacks. It's also known as a barrel house piano and and like oh wow, okay. And then that saxophone that's at the end of Barclay Muse, that's not a saxophone, that's a mellotron. And it's the same mellotron that you hear on You Know My Name by the Beatles.
Hmm.
And then you learn these little things because some people have said, oh, no, that's Brian Jones playing the saxophone on You Know My Name. It's like, well, there's a Mellotron Mark II, and you push a button and you hear that sound. Like people thought, oh, the intro to Bungalow Bill is some great flamenco guitar by George Harrison or John Lennon. Well, no, it's just one, one key on the Mellotron Mark II. So that's the whole thing to get into this is like the stuff that's driving you and making you feel this way, finding out where it comes from. And that was my whole thing. So in my younger days, I wanted to meet the people less to say, "Hey, I hung out with so and so," more to be like, "Hey, what studio did you record such and such at?" And back in the late 80s through the 90s into early 2000s, there were still people who had the good recall. Now, people are at the end of their lives. Cognitive skills have drifted, and it's sad because I can't tap into that. So I'm tapping into Disc and Music Echo or Record Mirror or Melody Maker and NME, New Musical Express, and all these contemporary publications that
Hmm.
have stuff, and it's much closer to the events. And if you really dig into them, you'll find a lot of stuff. So that's the backbone of the research in the Kinks book, is those contemporary resources plus interviews that I did, and then these other interviews I've mentioned, John Savage's interviews, Richie Underberger's interviews, those
Hmm.
things connected together and looking at, I would go to Doug and say, well, here's three versions of this story. What do you think of this? And he'll say, well, this is for what I know. This I think is the closest to the truth. So that's we would look at different aspects of the career, and even a short paragraph may take us hours to lock into what we feel is the truest, uh, most considered version of that history.
Yeah, I can understand that spending a lot of time on one paragraph just to get it right and make it as honest as you can without having perhaps 100% of the facts. That's one of the things that there's only so much we can garner, and it is great getting all those old publications. And I'm sure in your case, you actually have to chase down the physical publication because I'm sure most of that's not digitized anywhere.
Right. Well, increasingly there's more and more digitized online, but I built my own library when I was doing the Monkees book. Yeah, that was a 15-year process. I started that in the early 1990s, like in 91, and then I think
Mhm.
it comes out in 2005. And so like teen magazines, they were covered heavily in Tiger Beat and 16 and Fave and all of these magazines. There, you can't go to a public library and find those, or there's no archive of them. So I started buying them up, and then I was fascinated by New Musical Express, so I bought up a run of those. So I've got on the other side of this room, I've got New Musical Express 1964 to 1974, most of the Melody Maker. Disc and Music Echo is another favorite of mine. A lot of Record Mirror. Top Pops was another magazine, newspaper. In Britain, there were all these pop weeklies. And then the earlier on era, there's Mersey Beat, uh, Midland Beat. And we got great stuff out of those. Disc was its own magazine, newspaper. Music Echo was its own newspaper. Um, you know, and then the fan club mailings, and there's all
Mhm.
kinds of resources you can get. And then now, increasingly, like the Kinks toured all over the world, so you find a press clipping of them in Iceland. They performed in Iceland a couple of times in the course of the years of covered in our book.
Hmm.
You can do a translation and find out what some of these reviews, what they say. Oh, the Kinks arrived late off the plane, or they never played this show that's advertised and in the listing because they turned up and the equipment wasn't right and they refused to play. Whatever. I'm not saying that's specifically what happened, but we find that, or somebody has a diary. The Kinks in 1968 went to the Star Club prior to its closing, and they apparently had to walk through the audience to get to the stage because the dressing room was to the back. So they walk through the audience, they get on stage, they play about a song and a half. They don't, Ray doesn't like how it sounds, and then they apparently walked off back to the dressing room and they never came back.
Hmm.
So you find these amazing stories, and they're collecting them all in one place. That's the magic of this book, and that's why if people say, well, it's so expensive and it's so, why does it have to be, why can't it just be this? Well, it's like all that other stuff you can find for free online. This has a bunch of stuff that you could not find even if you spent all day researching online, looking at every free resource and free library.
Right.
This has stuff that you
Hmm.
could only physically get if you went to paper archives. We had researchers in England, we had researchers all over the world helping us realize this dream, and that's part of the expense, and that's part of why you want to do a book of this size.
Hmm. Even when I decided to do this channel, I knew that I was sick and tired of seeing copy paste, copy paste, copy paste. A lot of information that was just not interesting, wrong, and there was no good information, even good opinion reviews that were really available for a lot of the 60s stuff. And I
Mhm.
found that the only way you're going to get anything worthwhile is to dig in. That means a lot of research. It means a lot of newspapers, and I've got a collection of stuff on my own. That's where the real gold is. And most people are too lazy to do it. And that's why most stuff sucks that's out there. That's not very good. And it's really, we're in such a, I mean, there's people that actually think everything's available online. That, I mean, it's just a small portion of what's available online. And I mean, that's why I collect physical media, books, records. I've got DVDs and things like that. But I feel that it's a worthwhile investment because when they turn off the internet, you still got your stuff, you know?
Right, when your Wi-Fi stops working. The other thing that, we've had the internet widely used for 30 something years, probably more for some people that were early adopters. Mike Nesmith is the guy who told me, you got to get online. There are people talking about you. And he appealed to my ego of like, oh, I want to see what they're talking about. He goes, there's people talking about the Monkees and they mention you. You should get on there and see what they're talking about. So, I was on early message groups and stuff.
Mhm.
And then when a lot of these newspaper archives came online, it was fantastic. But what I have seen in the many decades is that just because it's gone up online, it disappears at some point. Somebody
Yeah,
stops paying for the hosting, or
very true.
archives go out of date with the permissions. So it's not just because it's digitized that it's there forever, and we've all had hard drives go bad. We've all lost stuff,
Mhm.
photos and documents and other things, and we thought, oh, it's digital, it's going to be forever. It's not forever. You know,
Yeah.
it's because it's the very nature of the convenience that means you're going to have to make a compromise, or you're going to have to let go. Your photos may not all be there tomorrow. It's sad, but but this book is going to be very hard to get rid of.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Yeah, very true. Very true. Well, let me ask you now. We talked a little bit about the Beatles, and what is your opinion? You are a legitimate audiophile. You've done remixing, remastering, so you have the ear of an engineer. What is your opinion on the overall job done on the Beatles remixes?
well, they're not for me. I mean, which is not to say that they're not good, but the emphasis is on a new audience. And also, there's also another layer to it, which is to extend the copyright of these masters. So by remixing them, it triggers a new copyright for them, and it extends the life of the master and the property being Calderstone, as they're calling one of their holding companies now, or Apple as it was, or whatever their holdings are through Universal Music Group. So there's multiple purposes. There's the aspect of, we're going to get new listeners in. You're going to hear the Beatles in a different way. We're going to extend the life of our copyrights. So none of that is anything. I mean, I've heard a lot of the remixes, and some of them I've liked, and some of them I've like, wow, that doesn't sound anything like the record. But I'm also somebody who is a bit of a purist. I mean, I have original vinyl pressings from the UK of the first pressing, or close. I mean, they're pressed so many times in the 60s. I've got black and yellow parlophones of the entire run of Beatles records in mono and stereo. I have a gold. I'd always heard the gold label, Please Please Me was the way you got to hear it. And one day I was in Liverpool at a record show, and there was one that I could afford, and I bought that. And I found, well, it does sound really pretty good, but it's like got a lot of mid-range and doesn't have any bass, which you would you wouldn't know. But
Mm.
I have like two turntables set up, and I can A B. I can put up that pressing, and I can also put up the pressing that they did for the mono analog mono box, which is really pretty great too. I like some of the new products and some of the new vinyl, but some of it also, it's like I have the originals. I don't, you know, I've got a lot of the US albums. I grew up with those. Um, so for me, like the remixes, I want to hear the outtakes and the demos, which we're getting a lot of. We got Anthology 4, we got a lot of great bonus tracks on the Revolver and White Album and Sergeant Pepper and Abbey Road boxes, and then you get certain things like, well, the demo of Goodbye. which is one of my favorite things. But it's like, well, it's obvious like this is off of a bootleg and it doesn't even sound that good.
Hmm.
It's like, well, how come you guys couldn't source something better on that? But it's that all that nitpicky stuff. It's, unless I do it, and then if I might been in charge of it, and then I if I went to Paul McCartney and said, "Hey, is there anything in your archive on this goodbye demo?" And you know, somebody probably would say, "You're not supposed to ask him for anything. Like, how are we ever going to get this?" There's politics involved in all
Yeah.
of these things that we don't think
Hmm.
about. They're like, how hard could it be to get the trumpet ending on Penny Lane, from Capitol's safety reels. Well, because they dubbed it off of a record, right? It's like they're, knowing what's in the archives, but sometimes knowing all that stuff doesn't necessarily get you anything. It just
Yeah.
means you know it. And these people are working towards trying to get this stuff out. So my feeling on the remixes is it's serving a purpose, but they're not intended for me. And
Hmm.
and not everything is supposed to be for me. It's the other thing I always think about is people complain to me about why are you reissuing this again? Um, Pisces Aquarius. I have that. I bought it. I've already bought it a couple times. Why do I need to buy it again? Well, every time a record comes out, you're not supposed to buy it every time. He's the big newsflash. I mean, we all love going to the store and like, wow, look, there's a new Beatles thing for me to buy. It's, you feel good. You have this good feeling like, hey, I'm buying this Beatles record. But technically speaking, unless you're a completist, you're not supposed to have to buy it every time. But there is a reason to revisit it with remixing to extend the life of a copyright. Or in the case of some of these other reissues, after 7 years, it's not something that's easily obtainable. The stores aren't carrying it anymore, or Amazon, things come and go on Amazon. They're not there eternally. And the business has also changed too. Whereas we used to be in the onesie twosie business, a guy would show up and say, "Hey, do you have Face to Face by the Kinks?" And oh yeah, I think we have one of those in the bin. Pull it out. Well, not everybody's waiting around for the one guy to show up to buy Face to Face anymore.
Yeah.
They're like, we don't have the room to stock that, or that's going to be something you have to order. And then the demand isn't great enough to keep it perpetually in print. The books I do are essentially limited run. I can't warehouse them forever. And the idea is to pick a number that will satisfy the demand and that you sell through the books and you don't keep it on catalog forever. And I learned that from Universal. I was like, why are they only making 10,000 of this box set? They could surely have sold 15,000. They sold it out right away and they're like, that's a success. We're not carrying any inventory. We
Hmm.
sold out
Yeah.
pre-order to these people. They're happy. They got it. We don't care about the secondary market. We just care that we put something out, we covered our costs, and it's not costing us more money to warehouse it and have to deal with the people straggling. Oh, 3 years later, I want that now. Well, there's a digital version of it. Well, I want a physical version. Go to eBay. Go to
Yeah.
Discogs. You're gonna buy it there for more money. And that's why people say, well, why should I buy anything on the pre-order? Why would I give them? It's like because you're probably gonna get it, unless it
Hmm.
sells out in the pre-order, you will get it. And they're basing their manufacturing numbers just as I do on what comes in the pre-orders. They're not saying, wow, we got 100 pre-orders. We should make 10,000 of this. They're like, we only got 100 pre-orders. We're only going to make like this many of this, or let's cancel this. Obviously, nobody wants this. That
Yeah.
people look really seriously at pre-orders now in the industry, and that's another factor of things to consider.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned renewing the copyrights. That had never occurred to me with regard to the remixes because I never fully bought this idea that they're remixing it so the youth of today will be more receptive to it. I never quite bought that because for 50, 60 years they seem to be okay up to this point. But the
Right.
copyright makes a hell of a lot more sense because obviously Apple is gearing up to continue the business and they've got to make money. So protecting that is probably job number one.
Yes, and I'm sure years ago they kind of died down a bit, but there were all these reaction videos. The first time someone ever hears "You Really Got Me," or the first time someone ever hears "A Hard Day's Night," or whatever, and I would have a lot of my normal friends like, "Hey, check this out! This is a guy, and he's never heard this song," and some of them are real and some of them are staged, but to me, like big deal. Like, who cares? But that's the thing for a different audience. That's what these people, meaning the normal people, are looking at. Like, well, this is cool. Like, and so for us, where it's like it's so much in our DNA, it's in the fabric of our souls. It's hard for us to understand the motivation for people doing what we consider to be a very average thing, which is just listening to a record for the first time. But that's a big driver. And you're like, wow, how come this has a million views on YouTube? Well,
Yeah.
because it's touching a whole other group of people. And why is it touching them? I don't know. But I also like if I walk into a drugstore, I don't and they don't have what I want, or it's too expensive. I don't turn around to everybody in the drugstore and go, I'm not buying this. But online, if you say, hey, there's a new album by so and so, I'm not buying this. Like, I got to let everybody know, no, or that's a rip or whatever. And usually without any follow up, like, I'm not buying this for this reason because I already own this or whatever. But it's people have so many people have a voice now online. And the way they're using it is that negative attention is just as good as positive attention for them. So as long as I'm getting attention, that's all that matters. And I don't see the difference between getting attention for like, hey, I spent years working on this book on the Kinks, and so it does my heart good to see people reading it and talking about it, and I'm going out to tell people about it because I want people to know this stuff. To like, I fell off my skateboard and my friend filmed me. Like, isn't that cool? It's like like, well, for some people that is, and there's way more people interested in seeing that than seeing me talk about the Easy Beats or the Kinks or whatever, and that's sobering, but that's
Yeah.
reality, and that's the
That,
reality
yeah.
we live in, and so whatever small part we can do to push forward this what we feel is the positive thing in our life, then that's what we have to do.
Agreed. Yeah, I'm always shocked at, I mean, these reaction videos, that's going to help keep some of this old music in the ears of young people. And I'm shocked that there's tons of huge channels that makes my channel look like a pipsqueak. And so somebody is listening to these, and this is how they, I guess, listen to music if it's not on a streaming platform. But yeah, that is interesting. Who knows where it's going to go? Who knows what can go viral? What song could be used in a film and have a little resurgence? So, it's hard to tell where it's going to go. Although I will say, I mean, a lot of these groups, the Beatles included, I've said for a while, are becoming more of a niche um, band as, people age out. I mean, if you look at Elvis Presley and his memorabilia the last 10 years, absolutely tanking. I'm shocked actually how much is dipped. So is that the Beatles are more modern than Elvis, obviously, not by much, but they are. How much more are we going to have before their stuff starts tanking? And what I mean by that, memorabilia, the vinyl market, things like that.
I don't know how much more time, and I didn't invest in it in the way of thinking I'm going to be flipping this. That I've got an heirloom that I'm passing on to anybody, or that I also see a lot of older collectors. When I got started as a teenager, everybody was 15, 20 plus years older than me, interested in the same music, and I've seen a lot of people, and they're like, I want to sell my collection, but I want it all kept together because they feel like, well, my curation of this collection is so important that you know that no one else could do it. And it's like, well, in reality, when you're gone, your collection is going to get scattered to the wind, and it's all this stuff is on loan, and it's really to make us feel good while we're here if you do it right. So it's a really tough thing to know. I don't I think some of the Beatles stuff is going to be eternal. It's going to be evergreen as far as certain things that people are always going to want, but that's just in my lifetime. I think there's other artists, Bob Dylan or Led Zeppelin or other major artists that continue to resonate with younger people. Bob Marley, but as far as collectability, I see more people interested in soul and funk records than in, Paul Revere and the Raiders singles, you
Yeah.
know. And it's just they don't move people in the same way. No one's forming a band that sounds like the Association now. You know, and if you played the Association in a reaction video to somebody, you'd say, "What genre is this?" They wouldn't say rock and roll, but in the 1960s, the Association were a rock and roll band.
Hmm.
Everything was rock and roll or
Hmm.
popular music. People now have to put these labels on things, pop psych, downer folk, whatever, in order to even sell things.
Yeah.
I have,
Bedroom rock, you know.
yes, yeah, lo-fi, whatever. And if that's what helps you get to the next thing. But, I think for a lot of us, it's like we're still I'm still discovering loads and loads of 60s records I've never heard. And
Yeah,
I've
same
been
here.
listening
Same
to
here.
it for years and years. And people have told me you're never going to run out. There's always going to be something else. And that's kind of really comforting. I think that's
Yeah.
that's wonderful.
Yeah, well, I started realizing it probably in the 90s. It's like, man, even then, this was pre-internet. I just keep finding more and more. And when the internet came, it's just this eternal spring of 60s music. And I realized at some point I used to throw parties and things and have people over. And this was in my early 20s that I realized I really have to have some current music here. I can't just play Cream or what the Association. Nobody's going to want that. So I had a
Right.
collection of new stuff. And then after I realized, like, what the hell am I doing? Why am I spending any money on Pearl Jam when I should be investing everything in the Kinks? Because that's really where my love is. And I can, Pearl Jam can be heard on the radio. I can borrow a CD. So I made up my mind in the 90s that I was just mostly going to invest in the era that I love the most, that makes my heart move the most. And that's why I did that. So, and that's not to say I haven't bought new stuff since then, because I have, but I mean, by and large, my collection is, I keep curating my 60s stuff. And like you said, I'm always finding new stuff. And even
Yeah.
in the stuff I do have, and some of that stuff behind me, I still have yet to listen to. I've had it for 25 years. I'll get around to it. But when I do, that in these band videos I do forces me to really go deep, deeper than I would maybe have gone if I wasn't doing a video.
Well, I'm happy to say that seems to be my experience in some respects too. I mean, and I do. As far as contemporary music, I mean, I collect other artists from the 70s and 80s and even the 90s, but my main collection is the 60s, and certainly the 80s stuff for me, there's a lot more emotional attachment to it because those are records
Mhm.
I bought as they came out, and I still play them and I love them. So,
Yeah, same here. I've got plenty of memories, and my when I started to make my space where I could invite people over, and we have a couple cocktails and people my age, and I wanted them to be able to go through the albums, and that is so fun because in some of the girls, that's why I got my '80s stuff, and they're going through, oh, let's put this on. So we put it on, we have the best time, and so that's one really great way to share it with people who are in the same room with you, which was more like it used to be when you'd be dancing or, when I was a little kid, you'd bring your 45s over to the birthday party and stuff like that because that's all you had. So that's still fun to do.
yeah, that's what I do with my radio shows, really my show and tell, and that's still my path to discovery, discovering these unique 45s or spotlighting an artist I feel hasn't really been explored. And sometimes it means I'm going to do my homework on that artist and really pare it down to a concise playlist of things. And then I'm always trying to put something in there that you wouldn't normally hear, mono mixes or unreleased things or whatever.
Hmm. And ladies and gentlemen, that's his Andrew's radio show is called Come to the Sunshine. I'll leave a link below. That's really great. And you play some really obscure stuff. I was pleased to see I went back to one of your earlier episodes on the Robs, a group I really love, and I'm from Milwaukee. So that was a group. I had a guy that I met at a record show, and I was like a teenager, maybe I was 20, and he gave me the whole catalog all these obscure singles on a cassette. So I was very lucky to get that, pre-internet. So I mean, the fun of collecting and meeting people, and so I'm glad that there are other places where you can hear this stuff, other podcasts, and you're doing that. So it's just a lot of fun to talk to other collectors and other fans.
Yeah, and I love Milwaukee for buying records. I've found so many great 45s in Milwaukee.
Oh, really? Ah,
Music
yeah.
Memories is one of my favorite places.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, and
Yeah,
I think
that
last
guy's a
time,
character.
yeah, last time I was there, there's a store maybe called Apex. Is there one called Apex or
Acme.
Acme?
Yeah.
Acme. Found a lot of great 45s there because Music Memories was closed that day.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I've got a great anecdote about Music Memories, which was I toured with Dave Davies. I was in his band as the rhythm guitarist,
Ah,
and this was in 1997. We came through Milwaukee, and we were leaving on a Sunday, and somehow Music Memories was open just before we got into a car and drove to the next place. This is November of 1997, and I was so blown away. We had like a 5-10 minute like little run in there, grab some things, and I remember over the door there's a picture of the Easy Beats, and I said, "Hey, I'm looking for some Everly Brothers singles," and the guy said, "Oh, well, we have so many, we just keep them right here on the counter." So I got some Everly Brothers singles, and I was walking out because there's these steps that go down. It's sort of like sub
yes.
level,
Hmm.
street level.
Hmm.
And then I was coming back up, and Dave Davies was walking down the street towards me, and he's like, "Andrew, you're glowing. Did you find some things?" And I said, "Oh man, it was so great. I found all these great singles." And he goes, "Do they have the Great Lost Kinks album?" And I said, "They do. I saw it there." And so he went in and bought the Great Lost Kinks album. So that was
Oh,
it's one of
very
my
cool.
happy record collecting stories in Milwaukee.
Yeah, I mean, Milwaukee's a great collector town, and I'm a collector of several things, so not just music. And there's like underground vaults of albums and stuff here that people have. It's crazy.
Mm.
And the record stores have always been pretty solid. So they've got a lot of my money over the years, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I can't wait to go back.
Well, let me know and I'll drive you around.
All right.
Well, let's break there because this has been a great get together. I'd like to have you back sometime, and there's a million things we can talk about since you're so well versed in all these 60s groups and the recordings and the releases and whatnot. And what I'd like to do is put links to your book. This is the Kinks book, Beatland Books, and
Right.
that can only be gotten at your website, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, at beatlandbooks
Hmm.
dot com. And the
And
Monkees book is there too, and there's a couple other Monkees books if you like the Monkees. You should check them out.
yeah, this is the Monkees book from I think 5 years ago. A little bit thicker than the Kinks book, actually. I think just by a
Yes.
few pages.
A couple
And
hundred pages
I'm
more.
just going to show off you even got your Bee Gees book here too. So um, got a couple of your publications. So yeah, I'm a big book collector, especially on anything on the 60s bands because it's very hard to find. A lot of these books are long out of print, and you can still get them if you look hard enough. So, but yours are in print, so get them while you can, folks.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure. I feel like I know you a little bit from watching all your videos, and I'm sure your audience feels that too. So it's you were on my hit list of people I want to talk to and talk about this book with, and we got to talk about lots of other stuff. Love to come back someday, and thank you to all of your viewers for keeping the 60s alive.
Well, thank you. And likewise, you've been on my list as well. So I was very happy to connect with you.
Fantastic.
All right. Thank you for watching Pop Goes the 60s. We'll be back with another video very soon.